hope we can enjoy the session. And also, please feel free to ask any questions if you have any doubts or any things that are not clear. Just let me know, even if in the middle of the presentation, okay? Okay, I can see at least some nodding heads. Can you see my screen now? Good. Okay, just a second. Okay, so as I was talking earlier, today we are going to speak about hospital disaster preparedness, and we are going to detail all the specificities of this concept. And so the aims of this presentation today is for you to be able, at the end of this lecture, to understand, first of all, the concept of hospital disaster preparedness, to learn the importance and the aims of a hospital disaster, or what's called an emergency plan, and to learn the basics of creating such a plan, and also to learn the importance of having an emergency communication plan. To obtain these learning goals, we are going to follow this plan. We are going to start with an introduction, a general overview of the concept of hospital disaster preparedness. Then we are going to go into details with the hospital disaster or emergency plan, some details also about the emergency communication plan, and then we are going to have an exercise together, and at least at the end, some take-home messages. For the exercise, it will be divided into subgroups randomly, and then I will share with you the task that you have in hand. Okay, so first of all, as you can see, or as you can understand, hospital disaster preparedness is mainly divided into three different concepts. So we have the hospital, we have the disaster, and we have the preparedness. Most of you will know or understand each component on itself, but to understand the general meaning of a hospital disaster preparedness, it's better to divide it into two ways. First of all is to understand, what does it mean, a hospital disaster? Can anyone tell me what do you know about what does it mean, a hospital disaster? I'm pretty patient, so I will wait for you, at least someone to answer. Okay, go ahead, Abdil. Sorry, Natalie, I will come back to you.
Okay, I think a hospital disaster would be like when it occurs something that this like disables or collapses the organization or the capacities of the hospital. So in a way that they have to like change their protocols or change the way they work so they can help all the victims.
Okay, this is a very good question, answer, sorry. Natalie, do you have something else to share? And I will come back to Inas also.
How, like, does it mean how the hospital is either prepared, like how strong it is, and how can it stand the disasters happening around it? How can it help the victims, if it's prepared enough or not? Or is it very susceptible to be even damaged by the disaster?
Well, you are more into the preparedness side, but what you said is right, but it's more into the preparedness side. Let's focus only on hospital disaster for now. Inas, do you have something else to add?
Yeah, my answer is very close to them. It's when the hospital capacity, or how can I say it? Oh, the victims and the needed resources exceed the hospital capacity.
Yeah, so I'm understanding that you have some concepts in mind, and that's very, very interesting. So mainly what you said is globally right. So hospital disaster is generally when the hospital's resources are exceeded beyond its normal capacity. So any hospital have a normal capacity. Whenever this capacity is exceeded, so it cannot manage to control the situation and it needs additional measures, we call that the hospital is in disaster. So in simpler words, or in different words, when we have a great number of victims, patients, people coming into the hospital in a small amount of time, we can say that the hospital is in a massive influx of victims situation, which is sum up the hospital disaster. So to give a definition of a hospital disaster, okay, it's not so easy to do, but the general known definition is that when a disaster for a hospital is a temporary lack of resources, which is due to a sudden influx of an unexpected load of patients. So we have two different components of a hospital disaster, which is first the resources, but also the patient's side. So this is what constitutes a hospital disaster. So to understand now what's the hospital disaster preparedness, we need to understand what is hospital preparedness. And again, do you have any idea about what's a hospital preparedness?
The measures a hospital takes in order to be prepared for an event or a massive influx of victims.
Okay, so the lecture is finished. Very good. Winston, go ahead.
Yeah, broadly, I agree with what she said. Just broadly, what measures or not preparedness, any measures or preparations or resources or like, I don't know, backup plans that the hospital has in preparation for any disasters that are common to the area that it serves?
Great. Ines?
Maybe like some policies in which how the hospital should act in the cases of disasters, like how the doctors should act, how to like the triaging of the patients, how to be done, the like how to turn normal room into like an ICU or an operating room or stuff like this. I read some national regulations about turning the other rooms into intensive care units, so I guess it might be related.
Yeah, exactly. So also again, what you are saying is quite good and all right. So we are doing great. So in small words, hospital preparedness is all those measures, and you already said that are taken before a disaster event, which these measures are aimed at, first of all, minimizing the loss of lives, minimizing the disruption of critical services and the damages when the disaster occurs. So generally, hospital preparedness have three main aims, which are to minimize loss of lives, to minimize the disruption of critical services, and the damages that might occur during a disaster. And all of these measures are planned before a disaster happens. So the hospital preparedness is a protective process which will enable the governments, the communities, the individuals to respond rapidly to a disaster situation and cope with them in an effective way. So it really helps to plan how we can manage the situation, but also how we can live with the situation and recover later on from that disastrous situation. So what does hospital preparedness include? Many things, but namely the hospital preparedness focuses on the development of a hospital disaster or a hospital emergency management plan, to have an effective early warning system, to have maintenance of inventories, to train the manpower, and etc., etc. So these are different measures that can be done to enhance the hospital preparedness. And today we are going to focus mainly on the hospital disaster management plan, because it's the stepping stone of having a good quality of preparedness of the hospitals. So why we are focusing or planning to have a hospital disaster plan? So it's well known that without this plan, the local health systems can easily be overwhelmed, especially when they're trying to provide care during a critical event, because they don't have the understanding of the event, they cannot have time to think of it, and they cannot have quite a good time to decide. So on the other hand, when you have this plan, the responses are faster, more effective, and all the negative consequences can be limited according or due to the disaster. So it's a matter of being well prepared, having a good plan and a strategy to work ahead and to manage the disastrous situation. For what? Why? We understood now why we are doing the hospital disaster plan, but for what is going to address the hospital preparedness plan. So the aim of such a plan is to provide prompt and effective medical care to the maximum number of casualties possible, in order to minimize morbidity and mortality that will be resulting from any massive influx of victims due to different hazards that you already know. The main objectives of this hospital plan is to optimally prepare their staff and institutional resources for the effective performance in different disastrous situations. So we have two major things that we need to work on: is the human resources and the the material resources in the hospital, to prepare them for dealing with the situation in a very effective way, or the best effective way possible, let's say. So mainly when trying to plan a hospital disaster plan, we have two main different things or different themes in which we need to plan for. Do you have any idea what are the two major category of events, let's say, that we need to plan for? Anyone? No worries. I mean, it's not an exam, so any answer is good. There's no wrong or
I
bad
think that
answer. Just to try. Go ahead.
I think that we have to be careful for the patients when a disaster happen in our hospital room, something like that.
Okay, so you are talking about the patients when the disaster in the hospital.
Yeah,
Right?
when we have a disaster in our hospital and we have something destroy or something like that, we have to take care of the patients.
Okay, this is one type, and that was right. There's a second one. So I will repeat the question, Inas. So what are the two different categories of events that we need to focus on when creating our hospital plan? There's two big categories of events. Okay, I have Inas raising her hand.
Is it like the natural disaster and MCI or?
No, Alpha, sorry.
Okay.
Inas, you wanna try? Where are you, Inas? I'm not, you're muted.
Okay. Yeah, I said maybe if the disaster, whether natural or man-made, have reached the hospital and affected the hospital infrastructure and stuff, and maybe if it's the same definition as we said, that it did not reach the hospital, but the numbers of victims are a lot.
You are very, very close to that. Good. So I will also listen to Inas again, please.
Maybe like something internal, as lack of resources, or maybe doctors are not enough or anything like this. And the other is related to like mass casualty incident.
Again, you are also very, very close. You're just circling around the idea, but you did great. So the two main type of events, let's say, or scenarios that we have is, first, in case if the incident is away from the hospital and not directly affecting the hospital. And the second one is in case of incident affecting the hospital itself. So happening inside of the hospital or in the near surrounding of the hospital. So we need to, whenever we plan for our hospital preparedness, we need to keep those two in mind because they are different in their planning. How they are different? So in the first case, we will work on enhancing the capacities of admission and treatment because the event is happening outside of the hospital. So we are going to receive many people. So we need to work on enhancing, as I said, the capacities of accepting those people and treating them. Also, we need to ensure the proper ongoing treatment of all patients that are already there in the hospital. We also need to focus that the hospital is delivering care for people that need it, for urgent people also. So we need also to focus on continuing that treatment and that care while taking care of the incoming patients. We also need to work on the handling of all additional tasks that are caused by these incidents. These incidents come with a new burden, with some different tasks from the everyday management situation. So this handling of these tasks need to be as smooth as possible in order to not interfere with the treatment and with the management of the situation inside and outside the hospital. Also, it works on providing resources and necessary medical equipment because, as we said, there's extra tasks, so the resources needed are extra. So the hospital will need much more resources than normal day situation. So this resources needs to be taken into consideration when preparing the plan. On the other hand, when the situation or the incident is directly affecting the hospital, so the first thing to think of is, first of all, putting into effect all the preparedness measures that we are talking about, but then also some appropriate actions so the staff can know their situation and their tasks in this kind of situation. Whenever needed, help from outside the hospital is requested. So whenever we need some other hospitals or institutions or caregivers or anything that we need from outside the hospital, we need to plan how we can ask for help. Also, in this situation, we need to focus on how the hospital can reestablish as quickly as possible, a normal situation. So it gets back to its normal functioning, normal routine daily situation in a very fast way and with a very smooth, fast and optimal recovery time. So these are the main two categories that we need to focus on, and let's say the general differences on how to work on these two cases. So now we understood what and why. Now let's see how we can create what is called the hospital disaster plan or a hospital emergency plan. So first of all, let's understand the criteria of this kind of plan. The plan, first of all, need to be predictable. So the plan should have a predictable chain of management. So whenever this situation will be declared, everyone in the hospital needs to understand who's managing the situation, what is the hierarchy of this management, and who to communicate with in case you need some resources, some help, some information. So this chain of management needs to be, first of all, addressed, fixed, but also predictable. So anyone can know who's to contact whenever it's needed. The plan needs to be simple. We are going to talk about the details that the plan has to implement, but we need to focus on having a very simple plan that everyone can understand, and also everyone can know how to implement that plan in an operational way. The plan also needs to be flexible. So the plan should be executable for various forms of disasters and different dimensions of disasters. So it needs to be flexible according to the context, according to the type of disaster, the type of emergency that might occur, and the different scenarios that we can imagine. Also, which is very close to simple, the plan needs to be concise. So it needs to specify all the roles, the responsibilities, the relationships, the communication, all the different components of the chain of the command chain and the different actors in the management of the situation needs to be there in the plan and to be as concise as possible. So whenever you detail everything, you can make sure that the situation will be managed in an easy way later on. Also, it needs to be comprehensive. So the plan needs to look at the network of various other healthcare facilities, along with formulation of what we call an inter-hospital transfer policy in the event of disaster. So the hospital is not detached from its surrounding, from its jurisdiction, from the institutions around. So the plan needs to take into consideration all of these surroundings, all of these institutions that might help the hospital in managing the situation. It also needs to be adaptable. So we know that the plan is intended to provide standard procedures that might be followed with little thought, so we don't have time to think and to decide, but it needs to be also have some space of adaptability into it. By adaptability, we mean that we can update a bit the plan, or we can make small decisions to update the plan according to the context, according to the situation, to the different variables that might occur in the disaster. You know, disaster is not copy-paste. Today you'll have I don't know, an earthquake, it will be the same earthquake next year, the year before. No, that's not the plan. So we need to have some sort of flexibility and adaptability in the plan so we can update it according to the context and according to different events that have happened. Also, the plan needs to be anticipatory. So all the hospital plans are made while considering the worst case scenario. This means that those scenarios might not happen in the future, but we need to think of them and to be sure that we covered everything in order to be in the, let's say, in the safe side. Even though sometimes, even when we include different type of scenarios, different type of events, and even when we think for all the worst case scenarios possible, sometimes different scenarios can happen and you find yourself without a proper plan. But at least you can have a proper understanding of all the different scenarios that you have. Like, for example, I know, I'm sure that all of you heard about the wandering missile that went loose around the globe. So that was, for example, a scenario that no one thought of or was prepared for, but it happened. And everyone had the fear that that missile will fall in a city or in a place that can cause harm and can create a disaster. And at that time, when some people were looking into the sky, maybe they will see the missile, others were preparing a plan for such a scenario, for such a possible scenario that might happen in the future again. And the last criteria of having a plan is to be a part of regional plan. So as I said before, the hospital is not detached from its surrounding, it's not detached from its regional context. So also the plan needs to be part of that regional context. And in a better way possible, it needs to be part of a regional plan. So we can start with a hospital plan, but we can go up and create or update a regional plan that will be in line with our hospital plan, or vice versa. So if we have a regional plan, we need to formulate the hospital plan according to that and following the guidelines of that regional plan. Okay? Is everything clear so far? Okay, I am seeing some nodding heads, which is good. Okay, so going into details on how to prepare this hospital disaster plan, In general, we have 3 steps to follow. Does anyone have any idea of the steps, these steps? We can call them steps, phases, 3 categories. Any ideas? Don't be shy. I'm not going to punish you. Any answer is good. Do I need to name someone? Okay, I think Ines. Okay, go ahead, Ines.
Well, I don't know the answer, but I will just try to guess.
Please.
Maybe like start by assessing the amount of resources that is available already, to know like how to reallocate them later for managing the disaster. Maybe also like the tendency of disasters to happen in the area and the type of them. Maybe it's susceptible to natural hazards all the time, so it might result in disaster, or it may be like in the middle of a war. So also maybe like the hierarchy, or some person will be assigned as responsible for whenever a disaster happens. And maybe like what happens in the army when a disaster happens, they have a specific procedures, like to call everyone in vacation, to never allow someone to take a day off and stuff like this. Maybe it's a policy that should be implemented in the hospitals.
Okay, so what you said is true, but it falls into one of them. But what you said is absolutely true. Okay, I have 3 hands, which is good. I'll start with Ines again.
Okay. I thought maybe the preparedness would be like a category related to the hospital, like infrastructure and pathways and stuff. And the other category is about the staff and the healthcare providers that need to be trained and prepared. And the last one, maybe, I don't know, maybe about the resources. So that's what I got.
Okay, that's also true, but also it falls in one of them. And I have more hands, that's good. Rabia, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing the name wrong.
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
So I was thinking somewhere along the lines of, first of all, communication. And that would also include interregional planning between communication between hospitals and proper communication between management, administration, staff, and emergency physicians and doctors. The second would be keeping a proper record of all of the resources that the hospital has and all of the resources in the inventory, just to make sure that everything is on the line for an upcoming disaster, and also kind of falls somewhere along the lines of anticipation for this disaster as well. And the third one, I was thinking of, carrying out regular testing of the equipment, training of the staff, and making sure the patients are doing okay, as well as the staff, so they can perform properly during a disaster.
You are very tough, guys. You're very, very tough. I mean, you're giving a very interesting details, which I really like, and all of them are true. But again, you are still falling into one of them. Okay, I still have Victor. Please go ahead.
Well, I only want to add that maybe it can be the first, something about the mitigation. The second one, it can be the preparedness, or in case then disaster occurs, and maybe the last one, it can be a response. It can be like the 3-step for a planning, and maybe in the third one we can include like recovery, response, and recovery. I think that it can be something of how to create a plan.
Someone finally jumped out of one of them. So yeah, Victor, what you said is also true, and it's very close to what I was looking for. I'll finish with Natalie.
Maybe also we can add how to prevent prevention, like along with preparedness and the other things that they said.
Perfect. Yeah. So yes, again, all of what you said is true. So we are doing great, guys. Don't worry. Okay, so the three phases or the three steps that we need to focus on when creating our hospital plan is first one, the pre-disaster phase, the disaster phase, and the post-disaster phase, which is very, very close to what Victor said. So we need to focus not only on the preparedness on itself, it means the measures that we need to do on the pre-disaster phase, but we also need to focus on what we do in the disaster, and also very, very important to think and to plan for what we do after the disaster. So we are going to detail each one of them, and we're going to start with the pre-disaster phase. So the pre-disaster phase, as the name states, is mostly all the planning of the hospital disaster plan that is done in the pre-disaster phase, so before even the disaster happened. So it's recommended in this phase that all hospitals providing emergency care to patients start planning for the worst scenario at the earliest stage possible. So for this pre-disaster phase, we have 10 steps to follow or to plan. These are the steps, and we are going to detail them one by one. So please keep focused. Okay, so the first step is to have a hospital disaster management committee. This is the most important and the stepping stone step of having a disaster plan. So in this step, we need to have what's called a committee, a group, whatever you name it, but it's a bunch of people that will be managing the situation. It's, as I said, it's the first step for making a disaster plan for the hospital. So most of the hospitals already have such a hospital management committee. So in here, creating an emergency / disaster management committee can be deriving from that group or from that committee. And the members of this committee should be from basic facilities of the hospital and in the best way possible, presenting all the different components of the hospital. Not talking about only the caregivers, but also the resources people, the support group of, I don't know, like the technicians, these people that are not delivering care, but they need to be there to understand how the situation is managed and to give also their recommendations and their point of view about the situation. So this is the first step. The second step is to create what's called the central command structure or an incident command system for the hospital. So these people that were chosen needs to have some sort of communication line between them, and that communication needs to be structured in a way. So everyone needs to know its tasks, its authority, its like the supervisor or their people that are working underneath them, and how they will communicate with each other. And that creates a command system that will be unified for the whole hospital. It might be different from the command system, the regular daily basis command system, but it might be also similar or maybe the same. So it's up to those people, this team, to decide how they will communicate between each other and what are the different tasks to be attached to everyone. The third phase or the third step is to create what is called job cards. So the job cards are like an action sheets of basic tasks and all the different steps and the different responsibilities that each person has in that situation. And by saying each person, we're not naming people. I'm not going to say in the job card that Inas will have this and this and that, Winston will have this and this and that. No, we are going to say that the incident commander of the hospital, these are his tasks, his or her tasks, these are his or her responsibilities, and this is how it can communicate with other people, and these are the different timelines that needs to be followed by this category of people or of responsibilities. So each and every position needs to have this kind of job card that it doesn't leave any details and it doesn't leave any room for personal decisions. So everyone needs to have like a working sheet that needs to understand all the different tasks and all the different responsibilities that that person needs to follow to understand his or her position in the command system. The fourth step is to create a plan of activation of different areas of the hospital. I don't remember the name, but some of you said already that the hospital needs to change its way and its positioning of wards or of places that usually are used in that purpose. For example, sometimes we can use the hall for a triage, like a triage area. We can use, I don't know, the psychology ward as a waiting room or as a communication room for the media, for example. So all of these areas need to be specified in the plan and needs to be, also we need to specify how to activate those areas, when to activate those areas. So it's not all the way, in all the cases we need, I don't know, a morgue, for example, to put the bodies. It depends on the situation. So we need also to think of the criteria in which we can decide to activate that specific area or not. Also, the areas on themselves need to be discussed. Which one will be, I don't know, the triage area, which one will be the waiting area, which one will be or what are the circulation of how the circulation of patients will be managed, etc. So all of these details also needs to be specified in the plan. Also, I forgot to mention, but also the capacities of these areas need to be addressed and mentioned on a map, for example. So like, I don't know, the waiting area can accept up to 200 patients. I don't know, the triage area can accept up to 20 patients, for example. So these details also need to be mentioned according to the situation, the hospital, the building, etc. So all the capacities that can be managed according to the areas that are created. So this is the fourth step in the pre-disaster phase. The fifth step is to have to work on increasing the bed capacity in an emergency situation. So every hospital has its specific capacities, its specific bed capacities, but it needs to have some strategies on how it can increase that bed capacity. By increasing bed capacity, we can have different scenarios or different approaches. Like, for example, discharge all the people that doesn't need an urgent care, or they like elective cases or something like that. So we know that in normal everyday situation of the hospital, we can discharge up to 25% of the patients, for example. So that's a strategy on how we can increase our bed capacity by 25%. Also, like stop the admission of non-emergency patients or the non-emergency procedures, for example, to increase the bed capacities of our operating rooms, for example, and so on and so forth. Different strategies that we need to think of and implement in the plan to understand what is the level we can go for in increasing our bed capacity in such emergencies and disasters. The sixth step is the planning of public information and liaison. So again, I get back to the idea that the hospital is not detached from its surrounding. So the plan needs to designate one person that will be the liaison between the hospital and the outside of the hospital. By the outside of the hospital, we mean the media, the people that will be looking for their relatives, like the governmental, I don't know, decision makers, etc. So all the people that will seek information, but also all the people that we have collaboration with whenever we need help. So we said that whenever the hospital needs help, it needs to communicate that to the institutions or to the facilities that are outside of the hospital. So this person also needs to manage that liaison between the hospital and the surrounding of the hospital and all the partners, let's say, of the hospital in taking care of these situations. The seventh step is the security of the hospital. We need also to plan the security of the hospital. In normal life situation, the everyday situation, all hospitals have some security systems that are implemented and regulated. But in an emergency situation, in a disaster, the security threats might be different. And these systems might have some flaws in it, so people can use those flaws to threat and to decrease or increase threats of the security of the hospital. So this needs also to be taken into consideration. If we need to close any specific areas, if we need to grant some restrictions in access, if we need to bring some more security staff, if we need to implement some cameras. So all of these security measures that are different and specific to the emergency situation that needs to be implemented in that also needs to be taken into consideration in planning our disaster plan. The eighth step is the logistics planning. So the logistic planning will include different things, but generally it's first of all the planning for all communications within and outside the hospital. In the general everyday situation, the staff might use the phone line of their hospital to communicate between each other. But in an emergency situation, these communication systems or communication techniques might fall down and might be compromised. So the plan needs to focus and to work on having some plan B of communications, etc. So it needs to be to have a plan of what are the tools that will be used, but also what are the strategies that will be used. And like daily, for example, the staff can pick up the phone. Oh, hello, this is Hamdi with you. How are you? I'm feeling good today, blah, 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 etc. But in an emergency situation, we don't have that time to ask for your family and what you ate yesterday or what's the plan for today, etc. So you need to have a specific communication guidelines for everyone to follow that, and also everyone can understand and have those guidelines to be able to communicate in an effective and fast way in the situation. Transportation planning also needs to be taken into consideration. The normal transportation means and the ways of transportation of the hospital might change in an emergency situation, like from where the ambulance will access and where it should go and where is the exit of the hospital, etc. All of these needs to be taken into consideration, and they might change according to the situation and according to the plan that we have for all the areas, all the circulation of patients, etc. Stores planning. In general, they have some places to store all the equipment, all the resources, etc. But in an emergency situation, these stores needs to be taken into consideration and needs to understand whether we need to make any changes in the stores or we need to create some kind of guidelines, protocols of storing, etc. So in an emergency situation, sometimes you cannot have time to go and look for the resources or for the material you need. So it's better, for example, to have some coding, some colors, something like that will help people to immediately access and rapidly detect all the resources they need. All of these ideas, all of these situations needs to be included in the planning. The personnel planning, whether medical or non-medical personnel, it needs to be planned all as well in the disaster plan. By personnel planning, we mean that the shifts, who is going to work first, for how long it will work, and like for example, who's the closest one to the hospital that can be here in the shortest period, how we can create this shifting system to help people get rest and to be ready for the situation, and for how long we can go in managing the situation in some specific shifting system, etc. So all of this also needs to be taken into consideration in the logistics planning. Financial planning, which is most of the time neglected in any plans. So in this situation, some finances, for some extra finances need to be prepared. We need to be aware that we might need to pay more and to spend more when in a disaster situation or in crisis. So this planning needs to be taken into consideration. Maybe it's not in details because it depends on so many criteria, like the type of disaster, the length of the crisis of the situation, and so on and so forth. But we need to take that into consideration and understand that we need a different financial system in the situation of crisis. The ninth step is the operations planning. So for the operations, it's a very easy process. So we need to have all the operations that will be run into the disaster situation or into the crisis situation. So everyone that is in charge needs to know that she or he is in charge of that situation and needs to understand what are the operations that that needs to be done. By operations, generally the operations start by a notification or an alert. So after the alert, what needs to be done step by step? What are different tasks, the different operations that will be done by different type of staff, the medical, the nursing, the non-medical staff, and everyone needs to understand the areas they will be working in, the tasks that they will be doing, and the different operations that will be open, let's say, according to the situation. Like, for example, not all the situation needs to have a morgue, for example. So the management of the dead bodies, it's not always, doesn't need to be implemented in all the situations, but that's an operation that needs to be detailed and talked about in the planning, and also the details of how to implement or how to open that operation needs also to be detailed. So the last step of the pre-disaster phase is the staff education and training. It was also said by one of you, but it's a very, very important step, because all what we've done in the 9th step before can be ruined if we don't have the specific education and training for the staff. So anyone can have a very strong emergency plan. All the details can take into consideration all the different things that we've been talking of. But if the people doesn't understand how to implement and what are the details of that plan will never happen, and the situation will always stay the same, and the same means a mess. So the plan also needs to take into consideration how the people, the staff will be trained, and what are the training methods that will be used. By training methods, there's different methods like full-scale exercises, tabletop simulations, different methods that can be used to try to simulate the plan and make the people understand what are their specific roles in the management of the situation. Okay, so this is the pre-disaster phase, the longest one, let's say. Do you have any questions? Is everything clear? I see some nodding, some not. Okay, but silence means that it's clear, hopefully. or that you're asleep, I don't know. Okay, the next phase is the disaster phase. This is, let's say, the easiest one if we have done a very good pre-disaster planning. So if the pre-disaster phase is done on a very solid basis, the disaster phase will be very easy. And it's constituted of two main steps. The first step is the plan activation. So mainly is all the criteria or all the details that we already mentioned and detailed in the plan of how to activate our emergency plan. So what are the steps of the alert and mobilization of the plan? What are the steps after the alert? And what are the phases that need to be followed and respected according to the situation that we have, according to the context that we have? And all of these are very detailed and specified in the pre-disaster phase. So it's only to follow the steps. If we did a great job in the pre-disaster phase, in this phase, you don't need to think of anything. It's like a robotic way of working because we need to manage the situation in the best way possible. So after the situation is hopefully done, we should go to the deactivation of the plan or demobilization of the plan. So also, this is very, very important to declare that the situation has ended. The emergency plan has stopped, because if we don't, people will still follow the same rules of the emergency plan. And to do that, we need to have criteria for them, and we need to specify those criteria and to specify how to do the assessment to say whether we reach those criteria or not, to be able to declare that the plan is deactivated and we can go back to the normal situation and the normal setting, the normal working routine of the hospital. Be careful that the deactivation shouldn't be very early or too late. Very early means that the situation is not handled. So I mean, people might come in more and the situation might get worse. And if we don't keep that plan activated, then the situation will be managed in a bad way. Too late, that also can affect the people, because the situation, the plan, the emergency situation is exhausting, first of all, but it's also different from the normal situation. So whenever we are sure that it's not necessary anymore, we need to stop and deactivate the plan. Otherwise, people will get very, very exhausted. Burnout will rise and everything will go the opposite way of managing the situation. So basically, this is a disaster phase, two steps, activation and deactivation. Now, the last phase is the post-disaster phase, which is easily said is just a post-disaster debriefing, but it's not always done and it's not always easy to do that, because most of the people neglect the fact that they need to sit down and communicate and discuss what went wrong, what went good, what we can improve, and what we need to keep as it is, and address all the gaps, all the problems that we have and be detected according to the situation that we had in hand. This debriefing session is very, very important to understand all the different components of the disaster, of the plan, and also it's an opportunity to learn from those gaps, to learn from those mistakes, and to address those mistakes. I'm specifically underlining the word mistakes, but I'm not saying people that is wrong or a mistake of someone. It's this phase, it's not meant to be pointing someone that, okay, you did this wrong, you need to fix something. No, it's an opportunity to brainstorm and to talk together to detect all the different gaps in the system, in the plan, to better address those in the future and learn from those opportunities. If we don't do that, we will fall into the same mistakes again, and maybe the mistakes will get bigger and will worsen the situation in the future. So this is very, very important to plan in the emergency plan, but also to do later on after the disaster. So basically, these are the 3 steps of having a hospital disaster plan. This is, now you have the how. I think all of you will be ready now to create their own disaster plan. Or not? Please say yes or no. Okay, I'm seeing some smiling, so maybe more or less confident. Okay, that's good. I can take that. Okay, so this is very important, yes, but there's also something else which is very important to work on with the hospital disaster plan. What do you think it is? Okay, thank you, Kritika. You're ready to have your own hospital plan. So what do you think it has to be done and taken into consideration also with the disaster plan? And you have a hint here, you have an image.
Is it to communicate with other external, like hospitals or the government, and to make connections in order to facilitate this?
So you said
Time of the
connections?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. But also with connections, what do we have? If we are connected, what do we need to do? I'm patient, I wait. Okay, guys, please. Okay. Go ahead, please. Who was talking? Okay, let me try randomly. Carlos, please. Do you have an answer? Okay, I think Carlos is not here. Let me see names that didn't pop up. Mustafa, please.
Yes, I was saying to have ways of communication with the other connections that we already have.
Yes. Yes. Oh, sorry, I didn't check the chat. Sorry, but yes, that's what I was looking for. So it's communication. So with an emergency disaster plan, preparedness plan, sorry, we need to have some sort of an emergency communication plan. And it's very, very important to specify, as I said earlier, to all the different particularities of the emergency communication situation. You will have, I think, in the end of these 2 weeks, a specific communication lecture, but this is only some details about how we can have an emergency communication plan. So the communication plan should include different things, but these are like the most important things that needs to be there. So first of all, processes related to how the facility can coordinate the resident care within the facility and externally. So how the patients that are in hospital will be managed during the situation, during the disaster, and during the management of the crisis, and how the data or the information of those residents will be managed and communicated within the hospital and externally, which means with other facilities, other hospitals, other institutions that we need to share them some details or some information about those patients. Also, how the facility will interact and coordinate with emergency management services. The hospital, as I said, the hospital is not an alone or standalone entity. It's connected to other services, to other institutions. So we need to specify in our communication plan how the hospital will communicate and interact with those services and those facilities. How the hospital will communicate its resident and its staff information while also focusing on protecting their privacy. There need to be protocols of how we will share personal information, personal data about the patients or about the staff that is working in the hospital. Also, how the communication of the facilities responds to the emergency. So the internal communication might be extremely different in an emergency situation, and that needs to be specified in an emergency communication plan. So all the details need to be specified in that plan, how the message will be conveyed, in which directions, what are the tools that will be used to convey the message, and so on and so forth. How also the facility will coordinate with officials, with media, etc. So how the hospital will communicate information, what type of information, in what time, and what way will communicate those information with the governmental decision makers or the officials of like the regional decision makers, etc. So mainly, these are the most important ones. But also we need to work on the primary and alternate means of communication. So we have a standard communication technique, mean of communication in the everyday working, but in an emergency situation, we need to specify what will be our primary mean of communication and what are the alternative means of communication. They might be different, and that needs to be specified also. And we need to make sure that people know how to use those means and know how to communicate with those means. The audiences of our communication and their contact information. And by the audiences, we mean everyone that we might contact when we have an emergency situation, like the media, the officials, the other institutions, the hospitals, the staff also. So everyone that will be addressed in any scenarios possible in our management of the situation. The messages also. So I already talked about this in a brief, but we need also to formulate some kind of standardized messages in order to help people to understand how will they will convey their information and the messages. They don't need, again, they don't need to think, they don't need to waste time, and they need to be straightforward in the messages. So if we have a standard message that will be shared with everyone according to the objective, according to the audience, according to the mean of communication, so they will have at least something just like a paragraph to fill with the information they need. And that also needs to be addressed in the communication plan. The resources for crisis communications. So all of the different means needs to have resources, and we need to address and to prepare those resources. And also we need to discuss how we can train people on using those resources, how we can manage those resources, and how we can make sure that these resources are preserved in the better way possible. So mainly, this is the emergency communication plan and the disaster preparedness plan that I wanted to share with you. Before going into the exercise, I would love to ask you if you have any questions, any doubts, any ideas you want to share. Nothing. Okay, everything is clear. Okay, maybe clear, maybe not. You're so tough. You are so tough, guys, by the way. Okay, so I'll be sharing with you a Google Drive document. So you'll have.
Sorry, I think that Ines wants to say something.
Sorry, I didn't see that. Ines, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I just have like a question. You said that the hospital preparedness, or like for the hospital to be prepared for disaster, there were like some phases, including the pre-disaster one. Just curious, like what if the hospital didn't have a pre-disaster plan? because, for example, in Egypt, we don't have quite solid regulations for the pre-disaster part. But when we had a disaster, it was pretty haphazard. I don't know, like, should they follow the other steps or something, or they should just go with the pre-disaster one, without the pre-disaster, I mean.
Well, okay, first of all, this is a very good question. So generally, if we don't have any like idea on how to create a pre-disaster plan or something, in general, the hospitals will try to do their best to create a pre-disaster plan. And how they can create that plan, they can try to see different, I don't know, examples, look into online, the literature, and try to find what are the ideas that can be implemented in that specific context. But with this being said, that not all the hospitals have a pre-disaster plan, but they need to manage a disaster at some point, in some way. So in that situation, it might be like they might get lucky because they know how to deal and they have the right people to manage the situation, but it won't be as organized as having a strong pre-disaster plan. So it needs to be there, and if it's not, it can be done. It's not that, like, if you find that your hospital doesn't have a plan, then okay, I need to deal with that and I will work with what I have. No, it can be created from scratch. If you look online, if you investigate the literature, you can find some examples that can be followed and implemented in the context, in your specific context. And then, of course, with trying, with living the situation and with the briefing later on, that, let's say, draft of a plan can be updated and can be made better according to the situation and to the tests that have been done. I hope I was able to answer your question.
Yeah, the answer is yes, but I have one more. Like, should the regulations be for like for each hospital on its own, or should there be like national guidelines or something that covering the whole or the different healthcare service providers?
Yes, well, it depends on the context and on the country that you're talking about. Like the example that I know of, which is Tunisia, we have general national guidelines, not guidelines, but general like plan on how hospitals can create their own specific plans that will be in line with those guides, let's say. So, and we also talked earlier on that the hospital guide, the hospital plan needs to be in line with the regional plan. So whenever you don't have any regional plans or any national plans, you can create something, a hospital plan, but you need also to be in line with the law, with the general guidelines of your specific country. You need to respect that. So for example, if I don't know, the country doesn't allow to export some sort of drugs or something, you cannot state in your emergency plan that whenever this situation will happen, I will bring this kind of medication or this kind of drug from outside of the country, for example, because your law will not allow that. So if you don't have a very straightforward, specific emergency guidelines, national emergency guidelines, you can go and try to work with the laws, with what you can implement in the specific hospital plan. But again, having a national guidelines will definitely help and will definitely support the hospital plan, because it's very, very easy to follow, and it has like a general overview, general guidelines or the specificities of the hospital plan. I hope.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Anyone has any other questions? Okay, so as I was saying, I sent to you on the chat the sorry, a case study of a disaster that happened. So you will be divided into groups. Your task will be to discuss that case study and try to detect all the like the negative things or all the flaws that will be that you detect in that case study, according to what we've been talking about now and what we shared in this lecture or the other one. So you'll be reading a scenario of an event that happened, and please try to be critical and to critically analyze that situation and come up with the negative things or the mistakes that have been committed throughout the timeline. You will have 20 minutes, let's say, and I will be jumping from room to another just to check if everything is going well. And then we will reconvene to the main room for you to present what you've been discussing. Okay? Is everything clear? Do you have access to the document, the Drive document? Perfect. Okay. Okay, yes, I will create 4 groups, that's good. And you will be automatically assigned to those groups. So see you later. I will join from one to another. If you need any help, just reach out, okay? Okay, just a second. Okay, see you later.
Hi, sorry, I just got kicked out of my room by accident. My Wi-Fi messed up. Should I move back? Or?
Sorry, but in any way, we're just going to go back to the main room.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just going to bring everyone here anyway. Welcome back, everyone.
We didn't have time to finish.
Sorry?
Those 20 minutes.
Yes, there were 20 minutes, believe me. But it's okay. I mean, the exercise.
Oh my God.
Yeah, see, time runs fast. This is a good indicator. That you liked the lecture, so I'm happy. But I mean, you're not supposed to go through all the case study. There's no problem. The idea is to discuss the mistakes or the negative things that have been happening in that case study. And whenever you stop, there's no problem. Okay, so now I'll ask a representative for each group to just share the outcomes of your discussion. So please go ahead, group one from room one, who can represent us what the discussion led to.
Can you say the names of the group members? Because I'm not quite sure which group we were in.
Okay, so the room one is Inas, Osama, Kritika, Mehbanu, and Zainab. Who wants to represent from group one?
If they're okay, I can be the representative.
Please, go ahead.
Okay. For the start, we were not very sure about we are gonna say if this process is late or if this is okay, but we are not so sure about the time for the start, let me say that. We think that the hospital disaster plan was started on time, but the whole activation was maybe a bit late. It can be like completed a bit earlier for the start. And the communication line in the hospital seems good. I think the disaster management committee was working well, and in corporate, they reported the IV lacking IV, and they reported it very soon. They responded it very soon. I think the communication seemed nice. And the first reports, probably the patients coming to the hospital was a bit hard. So patients started to coming in the afternoon. The first report may be a bit late, but considering the patient numbers increasing over time, that also seems nice. The psychological support department seemed on time too, because as the patients started to increase and their treatments were done, the psychological support department was established. But one big mistake, in our opinion, I guess, the Instagram photo, because I'm not quite sure about the photo, but if I were a patient, I wouldn't want to see myself in that position in a publicly shared platform. And I think the Facebook message looks good. The hospital saying is, we are okay and waiting for the patients to come and our condolences, and that is good. But the patient of the ED is not very nice, I guess. I'm not so sure. We're not so sure. And other than that, the management was okay. We are not very sure about the deactivation of the hospital disaster plan. And also debriefing meeting on the 1st of February seemed a bit late because the personal hospital staff can forget like about in a month, nearly a month later, the misregulations during that time. So 1 month seemed a bit late, and that's it.
Perfect. Perfect. I'm so happy. Great. Group 1, you did a great job. Thank you. Okay, now let's hear from group 2. It's Laura, Mustafa, Rabi, Victor. Who wants to present group 2?
Well, I think that I can. Adding to the group 1, we think that one of the main problem that the hospital have if that they do not inform to the disaster, to the ambulance and all this stuff in the pre-hospital, that they only have one capacity. I mean that they can say that we only can have like 100 of victims, and all the other victims that are, for example, yellow or even green, they have to move on in another hospital. We're only going to receive that, like the red code victims for via 10s immediately, and that seems one of the problem because they at the end get collapsed with 233, I think, victims, and also they do not have like the capacity to attend all of that people. And also we think that the disaster plan, the pages that the report said that it's 215 page. We think that it's a too long PDF disaster plan. We think that it has to be more specific. We have to have, they have to need concepts about how to do in these cases. And also we think that the communication was a little bad because they use email. So it's not too direct communication. And also they established like the line phone internal, but it was too late for that. And it takes 2 hours to fully activate the HDP, and when they get communication with the other department and that stuff. And also the communication was for us it was too bad because, for example, in one moment they have to move 2 victims to another hospital, but later we saw where the geriatrics department have beds available. So if they have a better communication, the victims do not have to move to another hospital. So that's the things that we analyze from the report.
Perfect. Perfect. You're making me very happy, guys. Thank you. Okay, Laura, do you have a question or something?
I want to add that we also
Please.
think that
Laura?
HDP more, like the disaster plan was less revised in 5 years prior to the disaster. I mean, in 5 years, I forget a lot of stuff. So
We forget in 1 year.
yeah, the plan should have been revised more.
Yes.
That-
More frequently, yeah. And Mustafa is talking about the IV fluids.
Yes, we also discussed about this. Just the fact that the hospital already knew that they couldn't accept all these patients, and we already knew the number of patients that the number of victims, the number of patients that is gonna arrive. They could have already ordered a set of IV fluids rather than wait for them to finish and then reorder them.
Perfect, perfect. You really did a great job, guys.
And also the Facebook page, it's not really professional to post something on Facebook. That's what I personally think.
Yeah, definitely.
They could have told the media team that already went there 15 minutes earlier.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all what you've said, and I'm really, really happy of these outcomes. Okay, let's move on to group 3, which is Abdil, Aufa, Carlos, and Natalie. Who wants to present group 3?
Okay, I can go and then we'll add to each other.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, so we discussed the communication. Like in general, there was lack of communication, especially when it comes to talking to external like parties, and also that as I said before, the Facebook page is unprofessional, and also that they didn't even use one platform. Later on, they used Instagram, and it caused outrage, and it's very like. It's a stupid thing to do to take a picture of how chaotic the department is, and it's just gonna cause outrage as it did. But we also said that it's a good thing that they had safety rules, like they didn't allow these outrage people to get into the hospital, which would have made things much worse. Also, we talked about how there was a lack of activating the plan throughout the departments. They said that the plan is activated, but the departments each activated it at a different time, and at times it was very late later on. Like there was a department that said that they had 6 beds very late later, and it and we also didn't hear about early discharge or like evacuating elective patients from the other departments like internal medicine, urology, and the things that they stated before. We didn't hear about the beds in those departments, so they could have been like potential good ways to treat patients and a good location. And also, we also discussed that the resources, they didn't assess the resources well. They found out that they ran out of IV fluids just suddenly, and they didn't deal with that in a good way. We also said that they established a psychological first aid department, which is good, but it's not it's not a priority right now. Like the priority is to deal with urgent cases, and this is a good thing to do later on, not in the beginning of the disaster. Um, okay, I think I forgot something, but I'm trying. If you guys
Any help from the group?
I think Natalie really lovely summarized everything. But I just want to add 2 things. The first thing was perhaps that there was no specific media room or liaison officer with the media established between the hospital and the media until quite late, or until they realized like, oh, we actually need like a proper media line, and we're getting backlash, for our Facebook and Instagram pages. So that was probably a place where that could have improved. And I've just forgotten the other thing. Does anyone else remember that point?
Yeah, I cannot. We also talked about the resources, just like the other groups. They were like they weren't distributed well, or they were not accounted according to what they needed. Or if they were, they didn't communicate that they were limited in resources. They didn't ask for more, or they didn't say like, we don't have resources to take all of these patients.
I'd like to add some, but not sure, but it's not stated for the administration team to inform the family about the patient conditions. I mean, like it's there at hospital, it's not stated there.
we also said that they deactivated the plan very early on, like it's not even 24 hours after the disaster.
Amazing, really amazing. I'm very, very happy with all what we've done. So I'm really happy that you already captured many things of the lecture. Okay, I know it's getting tough for group 4 now to come up with the different things, but please, I want to hear you. Group 4, Ines, Gilbert, Roxana, Chang. So please, who can represent the group's outcomes?
I can go. And yeah, like you said, it's really hard right now because they said almost everything.
Yeah, I know, because I don't, maybe I didn't have anything to add, so please, go ahead.
Yeah. Um, so at first, like the authorities, the police and firefighters, medical services, and everyone arrived almost 30 minutes after the crash. And we think that it could have been really faster because 30 minutes is a long, like the first two victims arrived at the hospital before the authorities arrived at the scene. Also, they all arrived almost at the same time, and this could have imposed the medical personnel to risks because they cannot enter the field unless it's declared clear by or safe by the firefighters. Um, Also, about then in the next paragraph about the hospital itself, the regulations is 315 pages. This is way too much. There could have been a summary or it could have been more concise. Also, it's created in 2000 and the last revision was in 2017. It's 5 years. A lot of things might be outdated. Also, it has been noticed that there was no training on this plan. People are not aware of it because when a disaster actually happened, they were still like sending the PDF file to people via email. Also, when mentioning email, we think it wasn't the really most effective way of communication because during a disaster, the last thing you could ever think about is checking your email, especially if you're a doctor or resident in the field or in ICU or anything. The email is not the quite best way possible. Also, there was like a 3 hour delay between the report and the confirmation that the hospital is ready. So this took way too long, and it could have been better with some organization or some
Ines, we lost you.
I don't know what happened to my internet. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So what is the last thing you heard so I can continue from?
So you, sorry? Ines? Ines, you're muted. Okay, I think we lost Ines.
I think I can just help to add on what we discussed like at the end. So basically, we were saying that there was more than 3 hours of gap between the activation of the HTTP and the confirmation from all the different departments, which is way too long. Like when they activate it, it should be like confirmed much more quickly, and that reflects like bad internal communication systems. And then yeah, we can hear you. Do you want to continue? Or if not, I can just finish.
Yes, you can, please go ahead.
Okay, yeah, and then I think the last thing we got to was about the bed capacity. So obviously they didn't have enough bed capacity to accommodate all the victims, but then they should have like tried to communicate with other hospitals or something much earlier. And they should also have had like a better plan on like how to respond if they didn't have enough beds and stuff like that.
Great, great. I'm really happy with the outcomes that you came out. This is really fascinating to say the least. Okay, so I don't think we still have time to discuss all the details and to share the analysis that we did. So I will send to you on the chat another Drive link, that in which you can find all the comments and all the mistakes that we detected and we analyzed according to what we were talking about. So I will just quickly, briefly, in 2 or 3 minutes, finish the presentation with some keynote messages, take-home messages. So it's really amazing the job that you did with the group work. I'm really happy about it. And as a take-home messages, let's say, so first of all, hospital preparedness is a complex process, yet it's feasible and it's cost effective. If we are very prepared to disasters, then we will have, we spend less time if we are not, and less time in the management of the situation. Hospital preparedness is a dynamic process. It means it changes all the time. And also it's a continuing learning opportunity. As long as we change, as long as we test and we do, as long as we learn from that, from this process. The pre and post disaster phase are of utmost importance and have a significant impact on the disaster phase. So we need to work on preparing the pre-disaster phase and also to think of the post-disaster phase in a very good thought of way. Just because a hospital has a completed written plan does not mean that the hospital is prepared for a disaster. The paper, that's called the paper plan syndrome. So if you have a plan that is written and it's in the drawer, it's as if you don't have a plan. So it needs to be tested, it needs to be trained, it needs to be updated every time. So you'll be sure that you have a disaster plan. Communication is what connects all the aspects of hospital disaster plan or hospital preparedness. So it's very important to work on communication and to leverage that and to improve all the possible plans, communication plans that we have. So mainly these are the take-home messages that I wanted to share with you. It was really fun to share with you all these thoughts. I was very happy from your presentations. That means that you were following and that I hope the lecture was easy and clear enough for you. So if you have any other questions right now, please let me know. Otherwise, I will kindly ask for everyone to open their camera to take a photo. I really want to have a photo for everyone. So please. For those who cannot, for internet problem, I can understand, but please try your best to open your camera and take a group photo. Okay, I'm taking one. Anyone wants to join? Please tell me. Who wants to ask? Said you want to ask a question? Okay. Okay. Smile. Thank you.
I'll open my camera. Give me a second.
Sorry, Ines?
I said I will open my camera. Just give me a second.
Yes, please. I'll wait for you.
Okay.
Great. Just a smile and thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was very nice to be with you guys, and I hope you liked the presentation, and I hope you enjoy the rest. I think you have another one in 10 minutes. Sorry for the delay. Okay, thank you guys. Have a nice evening and next lecture. Bye.
Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.